Hey everybody, Charlie Stevens here. Thank you so much for joining me for another guitar lesson. So recently we learned about alternate picking a little bit, and we learned about what eighth notes are. So eighth notes, as I mentioned in that video, are extremely important thing to know how to count and interpret and feel in our music. And so we checked out some ways to play on single strings in that lesson. We also learned how to play some scales using alternate picking and playing the scales with eighth notes. Today I'd like to show you how this all applies to strumming. When we're strumming chords, we can use eighth notes as well, and we almost have to get variety. If we were only just using quarter notes and half notes and whole notes, it'd be very difficult to get a good variety and a good sounding strumming pattern without occasionally throwing these eighth notes in, I think. Of course, I'm sure there's examples where we can find that have just quarter notes and sounds great. But, you know, you're definitely going to want to have this as an option to be able to strum eighth notes. So when we strum eighth notes, we're going to go down and up using alternate picking, just like we do when we're playing single note eighth notes. So please watch that video if you don't know what I'm talking about, and review on that, and hopefully this will make a whole lot more sense. So we're going to use this G chord here, this version of a G chord, sometimes called G5. I like this particular version of G, so that's why I chose this one. And if you haven't learned this one, that's okay. I have a lesson about it on my channel as well. Just look up the G chord video, and there's a video that has this chord and a few other alternate ways to play G chord. And actually, you're allowed to use whichever one you want. Doesn't have to be this one that I'm using, but this is the one I'm using here, G5. And we're gonna go down and also up on the ands. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and just like we did when we were learning one string. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. Again, check out the lesson on eighth notes and alternate picking if you're not familiar with that. But that's the same concept now. Now we just do it with full strums. Okay, so we're going to do an example together where we just hold down this chord and we mix in between quarter notes and eighth notes, because understanding where the quarter notes are, that's called the pulse. We really always want to feel the pulse. Even if we're throwing in these eighth notes, they have to go in between where the beats that are on the pulse go. We call these the up beats, which is convenient because we use an up stroke, so it makes it easier to remember, right? So we're going to give a pulse like this: 1, 2, 3, 4. Then we're going to do eighth notes: 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... Okay, so did you see I was alternating there? That way I can really keep track of where the pulse is. That's really important. We don't want to just do up, up, down, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. We don't want to do that over and over again to where it sort of loses its relationship to this pulse. We want to feel that underlying pulse of where the beat is. So we always tap our foot, and as I tap my foot, I do down. When my foot comes back up to prepare to go back down, if I want to, I can strum on the way back up, and that would be an eighth note. 1 and. Okay? So hopefully that makes sense. Again, watch that other video if you're not clear on this, and hopefully it will become more clear. But I'd like to try this example together. This is example number 1. We're just going to play quarter notes, then a measure of eighth notes, then a measure of quarter notes, then a measure of eighth notes. Then we're going to repeat the whole thing, just so we can really get a lot of practice playing this for a long time. We're playing rhythm guitar. It's very hypnotic. We're going to, just get in the groove of it, and it becomes almost trance-like sometimes, where we're just playing rhythms over and over and over again. So I really want to help you get in the hang of that early on. So that's why we're going to do this for a good little bit here. Okay, so please join me. Example number 1. 1, 2, 3, 4. And repeat. was example number 1. Great job. Okay, in example number 2, we're going to do the exact same thing, just kind of practicing this rhythm and mixing quarter notes and eighth notes together and getting that pulse and getting comfortable with where these up notes fall, upstrokes fall. But now we'll get a little practice on a different chord. We'll use the C chord. And I have a lesson about this on the channel if you want to review how this is played, but it's just a normal cowboy chord C, so hopefully this is a familiar shape to you. For me, the tricky thing about this is we don't really want to hit the low E. That one has an X over it. So if I'm doing all these strums, I might get it in there. Not the end of the world if you do. E is actually in a C chord, so not the end of the world if it accidentally goes in there. But it doesn't sound as good if we play the E in the bass as if we play the C as the lowest note. So I kind of let my third finger here, the one that's playing the third fret of the A string, sometimes I want my fingers to be standing up very tall so they get out of each other's way. That's good practice. But sometimes I won't be as careful and I'll use a little bit more of, instead of the very tip of my finger, I might use a little bit more of the side and to play that particular part. And now it's sort of touching this low E. So now it's muting it for me. If I play that one, you don't really hear it. So there's different tricks like that you can do to try to keep that one quiet, or you can just be really careful with your strum and just try not to hit the low E. So that's kind of the only challenging thing about this particular chord in my opinion. But other than that, it's going to be the same as example number 1. Same rhythms. Okay, so hold down your C chord and let's try this together. Example number 2. 1, 2, 3, 4. Awesome, that was example number 2. In example number 3, we're going to do the exact same thing on the D chord. So now this time we don't want to hit low E or the A string. So I'm doing kind of a shallower strum, a little bit of a smaller motion in my strum. And my strum is sort of like this motion in my wrist, by the way, kind of like you're flicking off water. Okay? That's kind of a good way to think about what your wrist action is. We have lots of different actions our wrists can make, right? It's almost like turning a key, this kind of direction. It's not so much my hand going up and down this way. It's not so much my whole arm going up and down this way. That's happening a little bit too, but it has a lot to do with this rotation of my wrist, okay? So when I'm strumming any of these chords, I could almost leave my hand there and see how my pick kind of draws a line. I can pretend my strings are over here and my pick will sort of get them on the way by sometimes, okay? Now that's something that you can keep refining for your entire guitar playing journey, is how is my right hand, how am I using the technique of it, how can I get it nice and comfortable, how can I get a good tone, okay? So this is just some food for thought for now. If this is brand new to you, you know, it might be okay to do it however you're getting it done, as long as it doesn't cause you tension. So we don't want to build bad habits. We want it to be nice and easy. So this is a nice way of doing it with very minimal tension, very relaxed, okay? Alright, so let's try that together. Example number 3. Same thing on the D chord. 1, 2, 3, 4. Alright, that was example number 3. In example number 4, we're going to mix these chords together, okay? So we're going to keep the same rhythm, how we had a quarter note, eighth note, quarter note, eighth note. We'll keep that, but now we'll change chords. So in the first measure, we'll do G, and that will be all quarter notes. In the second measure, we'll do all eighth notes again, but this time we'll switch to C. When we get to the third measure, we'll do all quarter notes again, but this time we'll move on to D. And then we'll come back and we'll do all eighth notes on G. Then we'll repeat that entire thing just like we've been doing. Okay, let's give that one a try. Example number 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Repeat. Alright, so that one is a bit challenging, you might notice, especially when we're having eighth note strums and we have to change chords. If you're new to changing these chords, that could be really tricky. They change really fast, right? So keep working on your chords. That's okay if this is a little tough for you to keep up with now. If they're new to you, you're just going to want to keep working on them. You can review the lesson where we talk about strategies of bringing your fingers a little bit away, how to practice chords, I think is what that lesson is called. You can keep reviewing that and getting these chord shapes where they're really automatic. And then you can practice these strumming patterns and they will make it more fun for you to practice that. And over time you'll get smoother and smoother at this. But even once you're really good at it, if we're doing an upstroke on the and of beat 4, like we are at the end of the second measure in example 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, and then I have a downstroke on a totally different chord right after that. Okay, so that's a little bit of a tricky thing to do, and I have a tip for that I'm going to make a whole separate video about. That one will be called the strum for nothing. Okay, so we'll talk about a way of possibly dealing with a challenge like that at a different point. So if you're struggling with that, just know, yeah, that is a challenge. It's kind of part of what we're checking out here and noticing today. Okay, so in example 5, we're going to do the same progression, but we're going to vary the rhythm. Instead of going quarter note and then eighth note, we'll go eighth notes first, then quarter notes. So the first measure will be eighth notes on a G chord. The second measure will be just quarter notes on C. Third measure will go to D and we'll go back to eighth notes. And the last measure, we'll go back to quarter notes on G. Then we'll repeat the whole thing like we've been doing. Okay, want to give it a try? Example number 5. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Alright, so this was just a basic overview of how to do downs and ups. Remember, the main takeaway from this lesson is to really feel the pulse, understand when we can go down, when we can go up. Once that becomes natural, you'll be able to make up your own rhythms with ease. And actually, we'll do a lesson soon where we talk about how we might be able to make up our own rhythms also, and I'll give you some methodology of how to approach that as well. But mechanically, getting the hang of where the pulse is, where the down, where the ups go, just getting that to where it's second nature is really going to unlock a lot of doors for you in terms of your rhythm playing, okay? So I hope you enjoyed that lesson. Please subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying this series, and stay tuned because we're going to have a couple other lessons that are directly related to this one in the near future. Alright, well thanks again for watching. I look forward to seeing you in another lesson really soon. Bye.